In this episode, we're going to finally start implementing the app in Xcode. But before we get started, I want to explain an important concept we'll be using throughout this course: views. This is one of those cases where it's better to show you first and then tell you afterward. Here's what the bullseye screen will look like at the end of this episode, but with all of the visible views highlighted and labeled. Note that some of the views are invisible, and I'll point those out to you soon. You can think of a view as anything that gets drawn on the screen. In this screenshot, it seems that just about everything is a view. The text items, the buttons, and even the slider, they're all views. In fact, every user interface control is called a view. Some views can act as containers for other views. The biggest view in the screenshot is one of these. It's the view representing the screen itself, and it contains all of the other views on the screen: the text items, the buttons, and the slider. There are different types of views in SwiftUI. These different types of views all have one thing in common: they can all be drawn on the screen. What makes each type different is a combination of what they look like and what they do. Here are the views that you'll be using in this episode. First, there's text. Text is a view that displays one or more lines of read-only text. The put the bullseye as close as you can to message is a text view, as are all of the other labels in the app. Even the text hit me that goes inside the button is an example of a text view. Second, there's slider. The slider lets a user enter a number by sliding a control, which is called a thumb, along a straight line track, where one side represents a minimum and the other side represents a maximum value. I want to point out that in most apps, you probably wouldn't want to make the user enter a precise number value like this using a slider, because that can be kind of frustrating. However, for a game like Bullseye, the slider makes the game challenging, which is a good thing. After all, we don't want to make it too easy on the player. Third, there's button. Button is a view that performs an action when you tap on it. You can put any view you like inside a button, and here we're going to put a text view inside the button that says hit me. Fourth, there's vertical stack, or VStack for short. VStack is a view that acts as a container for other views. The views it contains are called its children, and VStack's job is to arrange its children in a vertical stack. Parents, don't try this with your children at home. We'll be using VStack to stack up the 4 blue children views that you can see here: the instructions, the target label, the slider and labels, and then the hit me button. Unlike the text and button views, the VStack is invisible by default. Fifth and finally, there's horizontal stack, or HStack for short. HStack is like VStack in that it arranges its children views, but horizontally instead of vertically. We'll be using HStack to arrange the slider and its 2 labels in the order that you see here. Alright, now that you understand the concept of views in SwiftUI, it's finally time to open up Xcode. Note that since SwiftUI creates user interfaces in code, this episode will give you a little preview of what it's like to write code in Swift. Now at this point in the course, you won't be writing a lot of code. You'll mostly be looking at the automatically generated code and maybe tweaking it a little bit slightly. So you might not understand every single line right away, or what all this strange syntax means, especially if you've never done any programming in Swift before. But that's okay. At this point, what's important is that you get the general idea of what's going on. As you proceed through this course, you'll go through these concepts again and again until they begin to solidify in your mind. It's all about learning via repetition. Go ahead and start up Xcode and make sure you're running Xcode 12 or later. I'm running version 12.2 beta, and you may be running a more recent version than that. That's okay. As long as it's Xcode 12 or later, you should be fine. Then click the button here that says Create a new Xcode project. And make sure you choose the template iOS application app and click Next. For product name, put in Bullseye, all one word. For team, leave that to whatever the default is for you. For organization identifier, put in something unique, such as com.yourname or com.yourcompany and leave everything else the default. So interface should be SwiftUI, lifecycle should be SwiftUI app, language should be Swift, and all these should be unchecked. Click Next and choose a location to save it. I'm going to save it on the desktop. What this has done is it's created some starter code for you. And this is the list of all the files in the project over here. The file we'll be using the most for the beginning part of this course is called contentview.swift, because this is the file that's responsible for what the main screen of our app looks like. If you recall back to our slides earlier, you remember that the main view of our app is called content view, and it may have some views inside there. So the way SwiftUI works is over here is the code that generates content view, and we can get a preview as we develop the code over on the right. Now when you first start things up, automatic previewing will be paused, but you just click the resume button in the upper right and we'll see what we have here. And we'll see that the template to start us out with something extremely basic. It's just a text view that says hello world. And we can see this in the code over here. What this is doing is this line of code is saying, I want to create a view called content view, and it's going to have a body. And the body of the view right now is just a text view that says hello world, and it has some padding around it. So one thing I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to change this to my preferred indentation, which is 2 spaces. That's something I've set up in preferences by hitting Control-I. That's not something you have to do, but I just like it that way. All right, so let's say we want to change this label to show something else. Instead of hello world, we want it to say hello SwiftUI. We could change it over here in the properties if you want. So if you select something in the canvas, this is called the canvas, you can go over here and change it to say hello SwiftUI, like so. If you don't see this, by the way, this button over here in the toolbar will toggle this to show or not show. Now, it turns out this version of Xcode I'm showing has a bug where when you change it in the canvas, it doesn't add in quotes. So if you do choose to use that, you're going to have to add quotes back in again. And by the way, previewing has paused, so let me click resume again. And now we see that it shows up there. And we can also, now that previewing is live, change it to whatever we want. So I'm going to put it to be my name. All right, so let's see what we're trying to do here. So we need to put a label that says, put the bullseye as close as you can to the top of the app. So let's start with that. And we're going to get rid of the padding because right now we're not going to style it. We're just going to have the raw labels. You can also put emojis in your text if you want. So just for fun, I'm going to add some. If you hit Control-Command-Space, that'll bring up the emoji editor. And these tabs will let you look between different ones. Select the one that looks like a football or soccer ball. Scroll down and you'll see one that looks like a bullseye, which is perfect for us. So we'll select that, copy it with Control-C, and paste it with Control-V or Command-V a few times. And then we'll make a new line, and the way you do a new line with Swift is /n. So now that's on a separate line, which is great. All right, so next after this in our design, we need another text label that says the random target value to select, which is 89. So to add a new text view into our app, there's several different ways, and one really easy way is to click this plus, which brings up the object library. And then we can look at all the different types of controls that we can add into our SwiftUI app. And one of them is text. So you can select that and drag it into your app. And as you drag it, you'll see this little blue bar that gives you a hint of what it's going to do when you release the button. And the hint it gives at the bottom is add the text to a new vertical stack along with the existing text. So look over at our body on the left, and you'll see that right now all there is just one text. Now let me release this. It's done 2 things here. First, it's created a text with some placeholder, which I'm going to double click and change that placeholder to 89. And it's also put both of these 2 text elements inside a VStack. And again, the way VStack works is it just stacks these 2 elements one on top of each other vertically. All right, looking so far so good. Next up, we need a slider, right? So we can do that the same way. We click the plus, we scroll down to find a slider, and we just drag that in. And the blue bar will show up again, giving us a hint of what it's going to do. Now, look carefully here. As I drag this slightly up and down, 2 different things happen. The first says, insert slider in vertical stack. And if I drag lower, it says add slider to a new vertical stack along with the existing vertical stack. We don't want to add a new vertical stack because the one we have is already just fine. So we want to insert the slider in the vertical stack. So just be careful how far you drag. If I release that, now it's put the slider inside the existing vertical stack right below 89. So we want to have this hard-coded for right now to a constant value. So just type in .constant and open and close parentheses. And inside those parentheses, put 50. That's setting it to a constant value of 50. And then you put comma, and then you put in colon 1.0 ... 100.0. That's saying that we want the slider to go from the range 1 over here to 100, and the current value is a value 50. You can test that that works by changing the constant to 70, and you can see that the value is sliding over there. But for now, we'll have it in the middle with the constant value of 50. All right, so what do we need next? We need some labels to the left and right of the slider that say 1 and 100. And again, we can do that the same way. So we'll go down here, we'll select a text, we'll drag it in and check out these blue bars. Now this time if I move it to the left, we have a blue bar to the left of the slider, and the hint says add text to a new horizontal stack along with the existing slider. So I'm going to let go, And what it's done is it's put that slider and the new text that has a placeholder inside an H stack, which stacks things horizontally. So I can double click the placeholder and change it to 1. Now let's add the text to the other side. So I'm going to go scroll down, choose text, and I'm going to go over here. Well, I could go over there, but I can also drag it into where I want it in the code, which can be easier sometimes. So if I drag it right below the slider and kind of wait a little bit, SwiftUI will add a blank line in there, and if I release, it'll add it to that spot. So we can then double click and change that to 100. All right, the one last thing that we're going to add right now is we're going to add this hit me button, which is right below the slider. So again, we're going to click plus, take a button, and again, like last time, we're going to drag it into the code instead this time, just because it's a little easier, because we want it inside this V stack right below that H stack we just added. And the way button works is it has two things. First, it has an action to run, so when you click on the button, you can run some code. Now, right now, we don't want to run any code, so we can just put an open and close curly bracket, which means no code, just a block of empty code, or a block with no code in it. And then for the content, you can put any view you want to appear. And so we want a text view here. Now, I could, as we've done many times before, drag a text, but you see the syntax here, and we've done it many times. You should be able to just copy these examples now. So we'll just type in text, and in parentheses, we'll put in hit me. All right, so this is looking good. But so far, our preview is showing us the app in portrait mode. And I kind of like to see what it looks like in landscape mode, right? So this is what this block of code is that we haven't talked about yet. This is what controls the previews that we see over here on the right-hand side. And right now, the previews is just showing us the default look of the content view. But we can add more than one preview if we want. So I can type in content view a second time, and then on the next line, I'm going to put a tab and type in preview layout. I'm just going to type in preview L. Autocomplete will come up, and I'll hit enter. And then I'm going to type in fixed, or just .fi, and hit enter again with autocomplete. And this allows me to set a fixed layout size of the content view. And we're going to choose some dimensions that correspond to the aspect ratio of a device in landscape. So I'm going to type in 568, 320. And now you can see over here we have two previews. We have the portrait mode and the landscape mode. And you can see the SwiftUI is actually pretty nice in that it can dynamically resize things based on the space that's available to it. So in this top example, the label didn't have enough space to show everything, so it wrapped onto multiple lines. In this one, there's more space, so it can be all on one line, and you can see that the slider takes more space in landscape mode, which is great. Last thing I want to show you is to run it on a simulator instead of just using this preview. So up here in this top menu, you can choose from various simulators to run, and we'll just choose this one because it's the default, the iPod Touch 7th generation, and go ahead and click play. Now we can see the app running on the simulator, and you can rotate the app left or right with device rotate left, rotate right. There's also a keyboard shortcut, which is command left, command right arrow as well. All right, so the app isn't styled yet, but you can see that we have the basic user interface for the app, and we can start styling and improving it in the videos that come. If you got stuck, I've placed a download of the project up to this point in the course materials. You can also check out the next episode, which goes into more detail about how some of the code in this project actually works. Otherwise, congratulations, we've already crossed off the first 4 items on our to-do list, adding the instructions, the target label, the slider, and the hit me button to the game. Now I understand at this stage, the SwiftUI code you saw in the code may have been mostly gibberish to you, but that's okay. We take it one step at a time. And later on in this course and in this learning path, we'll break all this code down for you in great detail. Remember, it's all about learning via repetition.